to this day, I think every time I turn the lights off and catch my reflection in the mirror, I think of Candyman.
It's called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, 1973.
The Twilight Zone.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Wait Until Dark.
There was a movie called Candyman.
This movie called Psycho came on. That was an Alfred Hitchcock film. And we were in a little room back behind the garage. So it was kind of a scary little place anyway, because we were outside of the house. And we were watching the movie on this little black and white television. And I'll just never forget, we were in our sleeping bags and watching it. And it's kind of a creepy movie, kind of all the way through. And then in the shower scene, where Bates pulls the shower curtain back and starts, and the music and the knife, and we were screaming and screaming, pulling the sleeping bags over our heads. And we just could hardly sleep that night. It was so scary. And in fact, we went back into the house because we were just certain that somebody was going to come and break into this little room in the back of the garage and kill us with a knife. It was really scary.
It's not a very good movie, but I saw it at an age when I was probably too young. I want to say I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. Candyman is about some kind of creature that comes to life when you say Candyman 3 times in the mirror. And this movie was really gruesome. There was a lot of blood and gore. And I watched it at a friend's house, and his backyard had motion detector lights. It was a really windy night, so the lights kept coming off and on as we were watching this movie. And to this day, I think every time I turn the lights off and catch my reflection in the mirror, I think of Candyman.
And it was one of the most frightening things I'd ever seen, because never before had my dreams been something I needed to be afraid of. So I could not sleep for months. Freddy Krueger was going to come out anytime. And for some reason, 11:46 was the scariest time of night, because that was something that showed up on a clock in one of the scenes, and it haunted me for a very long time.
I could explain that by telling the story very briefly. This young couple moves into an old house that the wife inherited from her grandmother, who disappeared. And she unblocks the chimney in the basement, the fireplace in the basement, looks down it, and it's like this bottomless pit that goes down, and it turns out they're actually creatures, and she's released them, and they're about this big, and they're burned if any kind of light hits them, like sunlight or even light from a flashlight or a light bulb. So, and they want to take her and drag her down underground and make her one of them, and only her. So it's scary because it's like whenever the lights go off, they come out. So as a kid, you're afraid of the dark anyway. So this makes the dark even scarier, and they want her specifically, so she's being targeted. And when she starts seeing them and hearing their voices, no one else believes her, so that makes it scary because you're seeing something that threatens you, but no one else will listen to or believe it. And I was about 11 or 12 when it came out, so it made an impact.
When I was little, I used to watch The Twilight Zone with my father, and I loved doing it because it was something I could do with my dad. I did many more things with my mom than my dad, but he loved The Twilight Zone, and so we would watch it together. And as I recall, it scared me a bit, certain episodes, but, I was at home and I was with my parents, and I could talk about it afterward. But then what happened was, one night I was spending the night with a friend, and she and her brothers and I decided to watch The Twilight Zone. And the episode I watched I found out later, was called The Eye of the Beholder. It was actually one of the most famous of their episodes. But it was about a woman who had her face swathed in bandages because she had just had an operation, actually her second operation, to correct her horribly ugly face. And the whole episode, you really didn't see anything because you were essentially inside the woman's head, and all you could see is vague figures moving around. But at any rate, there was lots of talk about how they were so hopeful that this operation would finally make her look normal. And at the end of the episode, they unwind the bandages, and they did it very, very slowly, and she could see more and more and more. And finally, at the end, they unwind them, and they say, the doctor says it hasn't worked, she's still terribly ugly, or something to that effect. And then you see the woman's face, and she's absolutely beautiful. But then the camera looks at the doctor, and the doctor has this horrible deformed face, and the nurses all have horrible deformed faces. And now I get the significance of all of this, and I see how it's a very clever episode. But what happened for me was that these faces scared me to death. I screamed at the time. I ran out of the room. I, all night, cried. They finally ended up having to call my parents and have them come get me. And I was so scared by the whole thing that I could never watch it again. Once I saw it in the mall of a shopping center, and it just scared me just seeing it across the shopping center. At any rate, finally I did read the script and actually forced myself to watch the episode on one of those New Year's marathons. And it didn't scare me as much, but oh my God, I've never been so scared in my life as that time.
It was released in 1967. Susie Hendricks, a newly blind Greenwich housewife, is given a doll by her husband. The doll was given to him by a friend who has since passed away. Neither of them know that it has heroin in it. The men who were supposed to receive the doll from the woman decide to go after this blind girl, Susie. And they try to retrieve it from her. And the fact that she can't see is so alarming and frightened me so much. Because I can't imagine not being able to see and not being able to know who was attacking me. In the end, it turned out to be her savior, because she did not rely on the light for safety, and they were. And there was one scene where a man jumped out from behind a door or a niche, I don't know what it was, and everybody in the theater screamed. Everybody was scared to death. It was so sudden. But in the end, she was fine.